everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our daily podcast for overwhelmed, busy Christians, where we work on transforming each moment from the inside out, moving from franticity to freedom and enoughness, no matter what is going on in our lives.
Well said.
Thanks. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hello.
And as you guys know, we are working our way through the CSCs like normal. The CSCs are being calm, surrendered, centered, connected, and complete. They are principles that we found that when we apply them, it really does transform our lives from crazy, busy, and stress and franticness into actually having that margin, that room to breathe.
Yeah, they're internal qualities, not external. It's not us trying to use that stuff to manage, our circumstances so much as our hearts. Right.
And as your heart aligns with those things, everything changes. It's really crazy. You wouldn't think it would make that big of a difference because a lot of the time it looks the same on the outside. You're still doing the same stuff. You just have a totally different attitude doing it.
Yeah. It's tricky. Yeah, you're going to be taking your kids to soccer practice or waking up earlier than you want to go to your job, but it's what's going on inside. And we think that was a big part of Jesus's teaching and ministry is the heart stuff, not necessarily all the external stuff.
Right. So this week we've been spending the entire week talking about surrender in detail, some of the barriers to surrendering. So today we are going to talk about why would you want to surrender?
Yeah, why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the why bother, that's kind of a results question, right? Like, how's this going to benefit me? Why is this good?
Or maybe why do the benefits outweigh the negatives?
Yeah.
Because the negatives are things we've talked about before. It requires actually trusting someone, which is hard. It's hard in general. You don't know where you're going when you're surrendering to God's will. It means that he could call you, like we were talking about, to deepest, darkest Africa or Peru or wherever.
Yeah.
And, he always calls us outside of our comfort zone. It seems like there's a lot of negatives there. And, you're letting go of control of your life, which is a scary thing to do. I mean, we all want to have, well, maybe it's my type A personality, but I'm always like, of course I want control of my life,
I don't think that's just type A personalities. I struggle with that too.
Okay.
I think one of the other why bothers with surrender is because I think we've all seen and probably experienced our own hearts, if we're honest, what happens when we don't surrender and when we try to keep that control, we end up crashing and burning and kind of self-destructing, even though it's the opposite effect of what we want because we're doing it because we're trying to keep it all together.
Right. Yeah. The more stressed out I get, the more I tend to white knuckle my way through things to hang on to everything and to be like, okay, I don't want to give up control, but yeah.
To see if this is happening with you or with somebody just think of, do you know anybody who's an alcoholic? Do you know anybody who's a junkie, who struggled with whatever, maybe keeping a job or, and maybe you don't know exactly all the reasons, but, these are evidences of a lack of surrender and a lack of connection with God.
Right.
And to bring it really down to a more heart issue, is there a secret vice in your life that nobody knows about, and if it was going to be taken from you, it would be from your cold dead hands, something that's so important, and maybe you don't even realize how important it is, but it could be a ritual of some time. It could just be a ritual of television or a secret piece of chocolate at midnight or something.
Right.
These are little strongholds, but they
add up.
They're evidences of no surrender or a lack of surrender in that area.
Right. Yeah. I always think it's so interesting. Around Lent, we have a couple of friends who are very passionate about giving up different things just to kind of, that's their opportunity to check and see where they're at in some of those areas. And we have another friend who one day a week does not use his phone at all, which to me is like,
We do.
we do, yeah. Um, I don't know if I could do that. I mean,
Sure.
I could if I needed to, but when I was thinking about it recently, I was like, I should probably try that more than
Yeah.
I do. I went without my phone for a couple weeks when my
'Cause it was
phone
broken.
died, and
Yeah,
right, and it was like, man, I never realized how much I use my phone. I would, go to check something for the kids' school or
Yeah.
check the weather.
I think those are good. Yeah, Lent is probably a good, or even just thinking of like if you were just now thinking, oh, what would I give up one day a week? And if that was giving you a little bit of a panic or a cold sweat, it's like, that's
Maybe that's the thing.
maybe. I mean, yeah, that's pretty bizarre. It would be hard. And I know I've totally had days like that night where I'm like, well, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm not going to watch YouTube today.
Uh-huh.
And then when I end up watching YouTube anyway, it's I feel that like I'm disappointing myself, and then I'm like, why do I need it so much? And so
Yeah.
there's a lack of surrender there. That's a personal example for me.
Well, and that's actually not a lack of surrender. It's a lack of surrender to God, but it's not a lack of surrender.
That's true. That's what we've been talking about all week, right? How you're surrendered to something by default.
Right, right. That just means you're surrendered to YouTube, but not to the Lord.
Yeah, and to my plan to solve maybe the problem of boredom or stress or
Right.
whatever. Yeah, that's a good point. Another hypothetical, or is that the right word? What's the kind of question where you just are supposed to think about it but not answer?
Rhetorical.
Rhetorical. What about this rhetorical question? What would your spouse or your closest friend or another family member say is your little pet vice? And what if they asked you to give it up for a little while? Another challenge maybe.
Or if you don't know, ask your spouse or your best friend.
Yeah, really.
What is my pet vice?
Yeah.
They probably know.
Yeah, and the reason we're asking you to maybe consider doing this challenge is because this is the evidence that why bother? Well, because this stuff has more say in your life and in your decision-making process than you probably want it to have.
Right. And the negative consequences of that, it's not just, oh, you're missing out on these things. There are massive negative consequences. Like we are keeping ourselves from being able to be empowered by the Holy Spirit if we're surrendered to something other than God. We've talked before about that analogy with the hose where if you have a garden hose and you tie a knot in it, the water can't get through. Mm-hmm. If you, as a Christian, are supposed to be manifesting the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and if you want, we've talked over and over about how surrendering to God's calling is fun. Like, that's what we're missing out on. But we're also dooming ourselves to this life of overwhelm and frustration and stress. I mean, recently, I can't remember when it was, a couple weeks ago at church.
The other day.
Yes.
You and your sister
The
always
other
say
day. The other day at church, the speaker was talking about that passage where Jesus says, "Come, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and..." I don't remember the rest of it.
My yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Thank you. Yeah, so he was talking about that passage, and he was talking about oxen and how much oxen can carry. And he was saying that they had this competition, and then they got the 2 oxen that could carry the most. I don't remember what the exact amount was, but say they could each carry 5,000 pounds. Well, together you would think that they could carry 10,000 pounds with a yoke on.
Yeah.
But instead they were able to carry more like 25,000 pounds.
Yeah, I think those are a little inflated, but
Fine, whatever. I don't remember what
the
it was.
ratios though is the point, and yeah,
right.
It was a pretty amazing story. Yeah, it's
Yes.
not just, I mean, that's synergy, isn't it?
Right.
The
Yeah.
whole is more than the sum of the parts.
Yes. So the point is that when we are busy and overwhelmed and stressed, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot if we're not surrendering to the Lord, because we want to be able to be in Jesus' yoke. We want to be having his power working in our lives, giving us the energy to do the stuff that is in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Because life is exhausting
Yes.
in general.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and so yeah, like you said, being in the will of God and being connected is fun. It's also the only path to true peace is
Yeah.
through surrender to God and his way. I mean, the way the world actually is, God's reality.
Right.
That's the only place we're going to find peace. It also builds relationships and trust when we surrender to one another in the Christian community. I mean, don't want
Right.
to just do this at random, like we've said before. But when we are real with each other, that's the kind of surrender. It's laying down our pride a little bit, being honest and real with somebody. That builds the community up, and that's another. It enriches the peace of the community.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's interesting because I also wrote down isolation as a result of not surrendering. That, when we're
Yeah.
not surrendered to the Lord and we don't have that connection with Him, it really does make you feel like, Lord, are you still there? Because I'm not seeing you at work in my life. And yeah, it can be really lonely when you're not surrendered.
Yep. Yeah. I've definitely experienced that. I mean, surrender is such a big thing in the recovery community, and that's why. It's because we're in the recovery community for a reason, and that's because of secret keeping and secret sins and
Being surrendered to
vices.
something else.
That's right. And trying to be in control of my own life. And so giving that up to God. I mean, the Serenity Prayer is a famous prayer, but it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's being surrendered to God's plan.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just going to be trying to change all the things you can't change, and that is no way to live. Not very peaceful.
Hopefully that gives you guys some suggestions just in terms of why you would want to surrender. I mean, sometimes, like we've talked about before, you need that pain impetus to say, oh, I really do want to change. And surrender is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're talking about the challenges. Like, I would take up one of those challenges and see, get some input from a trusted friend, a close family member, a close friend, or examine your own heart and figure if there's something in there that you don't think you could quit doing for a day or a week.
Try it.
Yeah, in prayer and before God, and see if that brings you to see if that will put you more firmly on the path of peace.
Definitely. And like we're saying, hang on to the hose analogy. Anytime you're like, do I really want to surrender or not? The question you're asking yourself is, do I want to be a hose with a knot in it, or do I want to be a hose that water can flow through?
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for listening today. And tomorrow we're going to talk about practical ways and ideas to do surrender in your real life. And so please come back for that.
Yep, and we hope that you guys have an awesome Thursday and that you can make 1% improvement. We would love to hear any stories you have of how surrender has changed your life or any of the CSCs. We love talking about how those affect everyday moments.
Yeah, and the easiest way for you to do that is to join our Facebook group and make a comment on the episode. Each episode is posted in the group, and you can start a discussion in the comment section there, or on YouTube, or on Twitter. You can find us there down in the description of this show.
All right, we love you guys, and we're praying for you. We'll talk to you later.
See you.
Bye.